Well, welcome back, everybody, to Cool's Interviews. Today we have Barbara DeLong on our channel, which is really exciting for us for two reasons. One, because it ties in with our last one with Ken, as we're going to be doing a show with both of them next week. But more importantly, Barbara is co host with Mark, and Mark's really been a big driving force behind a lot of our new interviewees. So it's really exciting to finally get to talk to Barbara because we've heard so much good things about you. So I'll let you introduce yourself to our audience now.
Okay, well, I'm Barb DeLong, and I am the host of Nightlight Radio. And I have a website out there, barbaradelong.com. And it's basically a spiritually oriented metaphysical site. But we cover everything, as our intro says, from unicorns to UFOs and everything in between. So it's been a very exciting time for me. Ken Godsworth and I created a book out of material that partially was on my website. And since then, Mark Eddy has been a booking fanatic. So I am delighted to be here to talk about the book and whatever else you guys would like to talk about.
Yeah, and since we're going to be talking about that one next week with Ken, I think we're going to focus mainly on your website, your shows, as well as your documentary that you made, Secrets
Oh,
of the Stone, which I watched this morning again to just kind of get my mind back in the mode. And yeah, it's still really good. And it's really exciting too because we've recently talked to Dennis Stone. And so
yes.
I think we have an audience that would also enjoy hearing more about the stone structures around the New England area. Like you said in there, there's so many that
Oh,
it would wrap around the earth 10 times.
yeah. It was an adventure. My late husband Patrick Cook called me from California and asked if I had heard about them gosh, years ago, 15 years ago or so. And I said, heard about them. I live in the middle of them. And so when he came out and we started to investigate them, he said, "Oh, this is something we've got to talk about. We've got to do something with it." And before we knew it, um, he also had been doing a documentary for Gibby Media, and they wanted to actually incorporate our documentary into the series that they were doing. However, Patrick had the, you know, well, he had the guts to just die. So everything came to a halt. But we had already put the documentary out on megalithomania for 2011, so it did get exposure there, and then we just plunked it up on YouTube, and it's been an amazing adventure because while I was very excited about it and I wrote it and I narrated it, it never occurred to me that it would take on the life of its own that it has. And over the years, I've had people that have come on the show that I've interviewed, and I mentioned that I was involved, that I was interested in the stone walls and chambers. And it was really kind of exciting because probably half the time whoever I was talking to said, "Well, there's a couple in New England that did a documentary that everybody's watched and it's fabulous. You should check it out." And it was like, "You talking about Secrets of the Stones?" And they would say, "Yes, I've seen it. I wrote it. I talked it." It was, yeah, obviously my name doesn't come up enough, but the documentary certainly does. So it was something that we wanted to do more with, but when Patrick got sick and died, it just kind of is sat there. So it's coming back into life again. And I think Ken Godsword and I are going to look at it very carefully and see if we can't make a book out of it.
I definitely think you could. Especially, I think it's really important, like you say, in it, we got to help try to preserve these sites just because for Sam and I, up until Mark gave us Dennis, we didn't know about America's Stonehenge.
Oh my
Like,
goodness.
yeah, we knew about like Wampanoag and the Serpent Mounds and stuff like that. But like,
Hmm.
as far as America's Stonehenge, it was like completely new.
Oh, yeah. Now, you mean Gunji Wamp, right?
Yeah, Wampan. I watch too many things. Yeah, Gunji Wamp. I have it in my notes. I don't know why I said Wampan.
I thought there was another one I missed.
No,
Uh,
no.
No,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, we spoke with Dennis Stone as well. And at one point, Dennis was going to use it um, in his guest thing at American Stonehenge. Not sure if he did or not, but it, I think the thing that most upsets me kind of is that there are parts of our history that would make learning history so much more fun for kids in school. Secrets of the Stones is one of them, and the before Roswell material. If high school kids were presented with these kind of truths that have happened here, it would make their learning history so much more fun. And they not only that, but they would remember it rather than just memorizing facts and then forgetting it and going on to whatever else was going on. So I think that it behooves us to try to preserve these, and they're being dismantled like crazy for roads, for patios, for all sorts of stuff. So I think it's time has come again to bring it out into the fore and face people with the fact that it's there, and hopefully it'll make a difference in preserving our history. There's so much going on today with knocking down statues, trying to rewrite history, and this is prior history. This is way before the Revolutionary War. This is way before all of the issues that are being thrown around today are coming up. And there's magic in them. There's something there. It's very much like the pyramids. You don't know who made them, you don't know why they were made, but they're there, and people aren't paying attention and taking care of them.
Right. And there's so many too, which is another thing. It's not like it's just one little structure. There's a lot, and they're massive in size and just the way they're constructed as far as the precision, much like you said with the pyramids, how precise, and the stones,
Oh
how
yeah.
how hard they are. And that's what makes it interesting. Like you said, I think we do need to make learning history in schools different. I was lucky with the school I went to as far as how they kind of tooled their stuff. When I learned history, like I took, what is it called? AP something, prehistory or some. But
Yeah.
we ended up going into like just before the Romans and stuff. But we had to try to get back into the minds of those people, where we, wrote journals in the mind of the person, like made up these cities based on fact, drew maps and all this and that, which was really fun because then you brought life to stuff using
Yeah. You
facts. So
you breathe life back into history, and they're destroying it.
mhm.
I'm a next school teacher, and when I look at what the kids are being taught today, I'm horrified. I mean, like from I'll only briefly say it, but in before Roswell, one of the coolest facts that I learned from going through my own website, which is embarrassing. Um, do you happen to know who the first human being to shoot down a UFO was?
Who?
It was the Red Baron.
Oh, really?
Red,
Oh, I
yes,
think I
really.
remember hearing stuff about that.
Now, what kid being, having that brought up to them would ever forget it?
Right.
So it's something that gosh, you have to pay attention to. You have to give kids the real history instead of what has been cleansed and made boring and put in books. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, textbooks as we
Yeah,
I know that when I go to read a book, if it's textbooky, it's just so hard for me to slog through. And Sam's seen it. Like I've slogged through them anyways, but man, it's hard for me. Like I can't imagine people that don't really have that excitement. And I think one thing, if people were more excited in that history, we wouldn't see so much like vandalism, perhaps, because we've seen that a lot with like the Los Lunas Decalogue stone. There's like a
Hmm.
dish kind of up the hill because there's a lot of sites around there, and I don't know if it's like actually true Paleo Hebrew, but people have gone and carved out the figures on them. And
Yeah.
here in Daniels Park, there's an old armory. We've been doing a lot of videos on it, but no one knows the history of it. That's why we think it's so exciting. But they had to block it off because of kids and the vandalism, and it's just so sad to see.
Well, in the chambers as we were driving around, and and you almost fall over them. In some areas, it's really quite profound. Um, People were using them as places to store their garbage. People were taking them apart for their patios, and it's they're amazing. Yeah, they're a bunch of rocks. One of the things that's so cool about them is, first of all, they're watertight. None of them have water in them. They aren't leaking, and often they have trees growing out of the top of them because they're so tight.
Mhm.
But you don't see the roots in them. It's quiet. There's a peacefulness in them. I never saw a spider or an ant or a snake or anything in any of them. And I must have been in over 100 of them. So, and not only that, but a lot of times there is a magnetic anomaly in the entrance of them. So it's like, what's causing this? And mostly they're made out of granite, and so it's sort of like, is it receiving an electronic charge? Is there something going on here? Is there, we don't have hematite that's around here, so that you can't say it's a magnetic anomaly because that is indigenous, because that's not the case. There have never been any artifacts of any sort discovered in any of them. So it's sort of like, I would hate to think, if we could go back in time, I would hate to think that they were the outhouses of the Stone Age.
Right.
Right.
I know we're putting all these like just wonder into it, and then yeah, that'd be funny to find out like, oh, it's just an outhouse or something.
Well,
But I
it's kind of like the Aztec calendar. What if the only reason it ended where it ended was because they ran out of rock,
or they all died before they could finish.
or it was somebody's punishment for doing something, and in order to punish somebody, they were set to do the calendar, and then we'll get on with life. I mean, it's some of the things that we take as precious may be very common.
Yeah, and I think when watching it too, because if we go back to the chambers real quick, you were describing in like the documentary that they're like no ventilation, they're airtight, which really kind of rules out, like you said in the documentary, putting a fire in there
Oh
because
yeah.
for obvious reasons you're probably going to suffocate.
Oh
Like that
yeah.
doesn't seem like a very smart thing to do.
But if that had been the case, we would have found charcoal that could have been carbon dated. We would have found soot on the walls or the ceilings,
Hmm.
and there is none. And there's no opening to let air in or out, or windows. But the other thing is, there are no doors. So, it wouldn't be a very good shelter from winter or anything like that. And we went into these chambers in all seasons, and they actually were very, very soundproof, among other things. And the one thing that I noticed about a lot of them was that, I've been fortunate enough to be in some crop circles,
Oh,
and
really?
and they have the same smell, the ozone smell, that's in a crop circle is also in some of these chambers.
See, I saw Sam's eyes light up. Sam, do you want to ask a question real quick about crop circles?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
I was like, sorry, I was kind of like thinking of just like the comparison between those two. But you were in a crop circle. Which one, or do you know if it had a name?
It was in Virginia,
Okay.
um, and I don't think they named it, but
Okay.
and this goes back probably 20 years, maybe 30. I hate to admit I'm that old, but yeah, and we heard about the crop circle, and there I was working, I was visiting a store there doing readings, and so we took a field trip, and it was amazing. It was, you would step into the crop circle just as you would step into one of the chambers, and first of all, your cell phones didn't work or any of your electronics didn't work. But beyond that, there was a feeling as though, and I have to go back to Get Smart. It was like a cone of silence had been dropped over you. The outside world was muffled. And, did I look at the stalks and see if they were swollen or broken or whatever? No. but there was enough other anomalies there that it couldn't have been man-made. It just couldn't have been.
Yeah, I know we've talked to Wally Wagner about crop circles, and definitely some of them. I mean, obviously we know some are probably man-made, right? But
Yeah.
some of them are just so massive that it's like, how do you get so many people out there to do that without being seen in such a short amount of time? You know?
Well,
And with such complexity.
how about the one that is of an alien holding a disc with binary code? How would
How would we
humans?
do that?
Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. And I know that there are people that can create very pretty crop circles, but when you look at the intricate patterns in some of them, not possible.
Yeah, no, I've never had the opportunity to see like a real one in person. I definitely would like to, like at some point. Our
Oh
buddy
yeah.
lives in Kansas, so I'm like, well, maybe we'll have time to go see some out there, you know?
Well, I wonder if you have people in the area that of our spiritual persuasion. I bet you could call in one. I bet there would be a way to call in that energetic field. It would seem to me that I know they're here in this country, but they're not common. Great Britain has, I think, the majority of them, but also it has the majority of the the stone chambers and the stone circles and Avery and Stonehenge, and it has all of those types of things. So if you're going to call in anything, you should call it in from someplace like America Stonehenge, where there is such a huge um, collection of chambers and things like that.
And you bring up Britain. Do you think there's like an occult connection to these um, structures? Because I know like Britain was big for like Gerald Gardner and stuff brought up Wicca. We've delved into that a little bit because our buddy actually, his great uncle was Ray Buckland, who was like America's like first big Wiccan priest.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think there's like much connection between the two, or just one's attracted to one, perhaps?
Yeah, that's more likely. I think that Stonehenge was there way before Wiccan or the Druids or the Tuatha De Danann. And if I had to go back, it would be to the Tuatha De Danann because they're the oldest that I'm aware of that might have created them.
They're
I think
definitely interesting.
it's sort of like a lot of the old the churches and a lot of the ancient sites. They were built on the foundation of other ancient sites that were built on. So I think there's probably a stepping stone type thing that the energy is there, and different cultures and different modalities utilize that energy differently.
Yeah, and I've read a book. It's called, I think, The Source. It's an older book. My late pop who gave it to me, but they're talking about how they dig down so many feet, and it's a whole different civilization. Then they dig it down even more, and it's a different one, and where we
Exactly.
just like keep building up on each other. And we don't even have to go that far back. I mean, you can look at like places like Seattle, New York, where they've built on older cities that have burned or just
Sure.
fallen by the wayside.
Well, and a lot of times where there has been an energetic that people have worshipped at, um, it builds. And in South America you can see the difference in a lot of the constructions, and there's been a lot of studies done, at least one that I can know of, that the foundations were prior to the last ice age, so
Okay.
that there were cultures way back that may have been the originators of the energetic field, or capping the capping the energy, so to speak, so that the, the cultures that came around afterwards said, this feels good, this feels right, let's build on this. And you can definitely see the different modalities, the different techniques that are used, especially with the stonework.
Yeah, and that reminds me of Göbekli Tepe, because if I'm not mistaken, obviously it's like supposed to be super old, but I think there's portions that you can tell someone else was building it because just the construction of the stones isn't as good as like the older portions. So you can see where like maybe people are trying to copy or just add on or even restore, because we see that today we restore things.
Yeah, or learning how to do it. Sure.
Mhm.
I think that Göbekli Tepe, and there's another site that ends in Tepe too that's been discovered that's very close to Göbekli Tepe. So that they found now another site that is the T-shaped, um, stones. It's another case of we don't know what we're talking about here, but depending on the background of whoever is going to describe it to you, it's either ancient aliens or it's cultures or it's there are lots of takes about who created them, but nobody signed it, so it's hard to know who really did it.
Right. That's the problem with working with stuff from such a long time ago is, we don't have blueprints. They weren't storing them anywhere. And even if they were on paper, you're talking about so many thousands of years ago. It's all but dissolved at this point, even if they did make blueprints. And I know because I've learned about Göbekli Tepe through like Graham Hancock's books and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I know he definitely is more on the side of like just an ancient civilization that was maybe a little bit more advanced. And when they died out, or not died out, but a cataclysm happened and they kind of spread throughout the world to try to pass on their knowledge.
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And you look at in India, the Vimanas. I mean, the material they have on those, they have they have blueprints. They have described how they created them. And I mean, look at King Tut's tomb. He had the little airplane, and they blew it up, and they built it to proportion, and it flew.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing how some of these ideas that we think are modern, people were thinking about such a long time ago, and we're getting pretty close to perfecting even back then. I know talking about like, Nikola Tesla, like we've done a lot on the channel. There's so many things we can trace back to him that, you know.
Absolutely. And had we not killed him, you'd have
Mhm.
no idea what he might have done. And that's just my belief. I can't prove it, but I do believe he was taken out.
I mean, if not taken out, he definitely was like starved and like forced to live in the New Yorker because, I mean, he just looks like a completely different person. Somehow he's affording this hotel room but he's not making any money.
Well,
And the
he
FBI
also,
like raids it.
but that hotel also took the place of an energy source,
Mhm.
and apparently the generators and everything that were in the basement were far greater than it really needed. So that there's something else going on there. Don't know what it was, and Tesla unfortunately was strange enough so that people don't take him seriously.
Right? I mean, back in those days, you got to think the things he's saying now obviously are commonplace for us, but to
Yeah,
them, they were probably like, this is like witchcraft or just like foolishness. Like, we're never going to be flying. We're never going to be sending messages over airwaves to people across the seas and stuff like that.
right. Well, and he took in birds and made them his friends.
Mhm.
So
Right? Which there's plenty of those in New York. So he was not
oh
on
yeah,
a shortage of those.
this is true. This is true. I think that he was very close. There are some of his notebooks that have not yet been discovered. So I can't imagine. It's sort of like Da Vinci.
Mhm.
His notebooks were all written backwards. So and what he had helicopters. He had all sorts. He had uh, a gun that was like a Gatling gun. I mean, he designed so many things that came from the future. You do begin to wonder where his brain was or his consciousness.
Right? Like, why are some people, it seems like, so much further ahead?
It's amazing because the human consciousness is capable of everything. Way I like to describe it is that the human body, first of all, is an avatar for a spirit, and it's like having a Lamborghini and not being given the book and tells you how to use it. I mean, I have a new car, newish, and I still haven't discovered what all the buttons do. And I think as humans, with the spirit inside of us. We haven't learned how to push all the buttons, to use all of the techniques and all of the energy that we've got inside of us. We're very capable of telepathy. Buddha could teleport. It's sort of like, if we actually knew how to utilize all of the talents that are inside of us, we would definitely be a better culture. Unfortunately, all we're focused on is taking every new invention and making it a weapon.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, war seems to drive innovation anymore. But like you said, the human mind does like crazy things that we're not even aware of. I know for a long time, like poltergeist is something like we've talked about a lot, but the poltergeist spirits are usually just manifestations of your energy that you've like pushed out there.
Yeah.
And so there's like crazy stories of all these people getting like haunted by poltergeist, and in a way, they're just haunting themselves, like fighting their inner demons, but in like a metaphysical, like actual physical form.
Well, they're creating holographs of what's going on inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a number of times I've been called in to investigate what they said was a haunting. And I think the last time when I went through the house and everything, I said, there's no spirits here. However, in one room, one of the girls was sexually abused, and that girl was living in the house, and her daughter was coming of the same age that it happened to her. So the memory triggered what was going on. And when it was explained to them that way, I mean, they got her help and everything stopped.
Which is, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, there, like you said, there's just so many things I'm sure we can do that we're just not even tapping into.
It is. It's sad. It really is. And there are people that actually are able to do a lot of things. I mean, bending spoons is a cool trick, but it doesn't do you any good as far as spiritual evolution goes. But I think that people will work on their spirituality to a certain level and then think, well, this is it. I'm done. And the reality is you're never done. And the further you go, the more you learn, the more you manifest, and the more exciting life gets, actually. But it's up to each individual. This is a human experience. We're here to experience all of the human emotions and physicalities, some of which I could do without. And it's sort of like, okay, been here, done this. Let's find something else to do next time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think too, like modern society kind of makes it so we lose touch with something. We're so focused on like jobs, and obviously we got to pay bills. Like these are just things, unfortunately, we got to do. But I know recently, me and Sam in our group, we went up to Alamosa to do a paranormal investigation and presentation at the school up there. But because even though you're in like civilization, there's not a lot of cell phone signal. And so it really just opens you back up, and like it really cemented the fact that I think we just need to help people more. I mean, that's our goal, but just keep building people, because that's where I got like the most enjoyment from, was just like seeing people experiencing these different factors that, most of the time they probably won't be able to.
Well, I think the pandemic gave all of us the opportunity to work on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of times when I lost my internet. Now then I felt really isolated, and it was like, all right, so what can I do? And then you start working on yourself. Then you have the silence to actually meditate. Then you can sit and write. You can do all sorts of things. But until you take away those distractions that we have become so familiar with, you forget about it. It doesn't make, I can't waste my time with it. I don't have time for that. And cell phones ring all the time. They beep, they do all sorts of things. They distract us. And with the world the way it is today, there are so many distractions out there where we're being put through an initiatory process in a certain way to sort of let go of the things that have cluttered us and get down to what the very basics are.
Knowledge is like always been my big thing, and then just trying to help build up others. And like I was telling Sam, like I felt like this trip really cemented that in me. Like it brought me back to a place where I just like I almost felt kind of sad to leave. You know, that whole next couple of days I kind of felt down because it was such a mountaintop thing. And you know, I'm so thankful for you and Mark because obviously you guys have helped connect us with more paranormal.
Uh-huh.
And surprisingly, it's really hard to find people that are open to networking. It's been something that's getting better, and I'm sure you've dealt with it, but I mean, there's just times where people are just like, no, I don't want to like work with you, or you know, I want to find it for myself. And I think that's why I have like an affinity for one paranormal show because they were the only ones that ever wrote back to us and actually took time out of their time and their days to actually like reach out to us.
Well, Mark arranged for me to be on some show, and I can't remember which one it was, but it had two men as hosts. And because I was in the paranormal field, because I'm an ordained minister,
Mhm.
um, and one of the men wouldn't come on the show because of what I did, which I
Really?
found, which I found, you know, part of it I thought was cool, and the other part I was insulted with. So, I focused on the cool part. But it's sort of like, yeah, it's somehow today far more acceptable.
Mhm.
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in what you would call the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. And people said to me when I was coming from Connecticut, "Oh, you're not going to get along there. They're not going to like you, and and because of what you do." And I'm in a condominium thing, and they all know that I'm an ordained minister. Nobody ever asks me, you know, what what flavor are you? Um, so I'm very accepted, and it's been a great experience because I had been braced to be shunned and have people, write things on my car or whatever. And none of that ever happened. So I think that it's a more acceptable field, or maybe because I'm a retired school teacher, it gave me some authenticity. I'm not sure why, but so and they all know what I do, and they all know I write books, and then I have a website. They all know that, and yet I haven't been, marked as being weird or anything like that. So maybe the ball is swinging more in our direction, that any belief system, so long as you follow it faithfully, is a good one.
I think at the core, most faith systems are just about being like nice to others and like being respectful and not doing bad things. So I think as long as you're like doing that, like, more power to you.
Well, every major religion is founded on the golden rule.
Mhm.
And if you've got that working for you, you're fine.
And like you said, going back to like the more acceptance, I definitely think we're getting to a stage where more people maybe are also learning like if we work together, we'll get a lot further than working separately. And that's something me and Sam have always tried to do is work with as many people, even if it's topics maybe we don't, believe in. I've always tried to reach out to, we do a lot of Billy the Kid stuff. So I've tried to reach out
Uh-huh.
to some of the Brushy Bill believers. I've not got any contact back, but I'm always open to hearing. I think you need to know both sides before you make a conclusion.
Absolutely. And, Mark and I, gosh, we've done over 1,000 shows. And somebody, an old friend of mine, said, he wasn't sure he wanted to be friends with me anymore because of, all the people that I had on the radio show. And I said, I don't believe in everything everyone says. I find that there's a piece of truth everywhere, but just because I'm interviewing somebody doesn't mean I am joining their church. It's and we've met amazing people, and it's been an adventure. I think Mark and I have been together on the show for about, he could probably tell you how many days it is, 5 years or so. Um, when he became available, I said to him, "Come on, come over to Nightlight and I'll give you your own show and I'll do all the prep work and everything. The only thing is you have to share your contacts with me, which he's done. And, we've had a lovely time.
Yeah, no, Mark's been good, and a lot of the interviews that he set up, he gives us your guys' shows to kind of research, as a starting point, and
Sure.
so that's where we got to start listening to you. And I do apologize I haven't gone through all of them, but we have been listening to a lot, especially lately. Getting ready for this one, we've tried to listen to as many as we can, but like you said, there's quite a bunch there. So if anyone's watching, go check her out on YouTube for sure. It's just her name, Barbara DeLong. You can find her stuff as far as if you want to keep watching stuff on YouTube. But I recommend it because, you can watch for days and days and days and lots of great stuff. So,
Oh yeah, it's really kind of
Lots of good
interesting.
topics.
I'm doing a show with Gaffy. Gaffy, I think is his name, and he's talking about polar shifts and stuff like that. And I'm having so much fun reading his book because both Mark and I read the books of every author we interview. We actually read the book, and what is fun about him is the first two people that he's talked about that have helped him on his way, that have researched, that have guided him, are two people that have already been on the show a number of times.
oh, really?
So I'm sitting there saying, "Oh, I know him. He's been on the show a couple of times." And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun. And after a while, you do run into that because, the field isn't that big. So that, especially if you're talking about, um, things like pole shifts and things like that, that's, you know, when you get to quantum physics, I really steer away from that. I don't understand it at all. But
Quantum physics and string theory and stuff.
oh yeah, Amit Goswami has been on the show a number of times, and I don't understand him. I don't know if it's a language difference or if it's just a verbal difference, but it's kind of like I struggled for the book that was in English, and he doesn't talk in English.
Yeah, no, sometimes like there's so much information too. I think that's just like getting thrown at you where it just kind of becomes hard. I read a book that was like 900 pages. And after 300, I was like, I don't know what else you can say. Like, I feel like this has been, it was almost like beating a dead horse. It's really great information, but I was like, okay, let's condense it a little bit.
I had one of those books, and after 800 pages, I knew more about flints than I ever want to know. I mean, I didn't care. Give him a knife and let it be. It was important stuff, but it was
Mhm.
just hammered to death.
Right. And then you're just like, I know there was one point of that book where I was like really questioning, do I finish it? And I was like, I've gone too far. I must finish it now.
Although there are some books that are 500 and 600 pages that are fascinating and you just
Mhm.
can't put them down. But some of these research books where they're going into the archaeological history and what one expert said and another expert said, and then another expert didn't agree, and you had their dialogue back and forth. Who cares?
Right.
It's just, I'm sure it was a wonderful resource book for somebody, but not me.
Right. Yeah, it's good for somebody and for some research, but as a fun, like, let's just read this on the beach type of book, no.
No, no. I mean, I like big books because I read fast.
Mhm.
And I love having to read the books in order to talk to the people because then it's a conversation, not a cold interview where you just throw questions at somebody. You really understand where they're coming from and you have questions about their philosophy and it makes for a much better interview.
Yeah, and plus, like, I've only experienced this, like, in the good way, but when you read the book, you kind of get a sense of who they are
Yeah.
and you get, like, their personality and stuff. And so far, everyone that we've interviewed matches with the personality I'm imagining in my head. But I'm sure, like, every once in a while, you're like, who was that person that I read? You know?
Well, that's I will give you advice since I may have been doing this then longer than you have. I always require that I speak to the author before the show.
Okay.
And the reason I do that is because I had the interview from hell. I loved the book. I adored the material, and I wasn't able to talk to the author beforehand. So I introduced him and I brought him onto the show and I welcomed him and he said, thank you. And I asked him a question and he said, uh-huh.
Really?
And that's all he said the whole 2 hours.
Really?
And I found I had to ask the question with the answer in it so he could say, uh-huh. So I did the interview. I did both sides of the interview. And I said, never again. If they can't talk to me or if they won't talk to me, there's no show.
Do you think that was like more just not very good person, like a people person, like communication, or
Yeah.
just something maybe they didn't want to be on the show after a while, or like
No, I think he wanted to be on the show.
you just couldn't communicate?
He wanted his book to be publicized,
Hmm.
and I highly recommended the book, but don't try talking to him. Um, you know, it was so ever since then, it's been an absolute. I either talk to the author ahead of time or I don't do the show. And I've had a couple of people that I had one man that I called him and I said, "Is this a good time to just chat for a few minutes?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, can you give me a time when it would be good?" He said, "No, I don't have time to do this." And I said, "Well, I respect that." And I canceled the show,
Yeah.
took the night off. I mean, it's just something about if it's not a good time, fine, give me a good time. And I
Yeah.
said, I only need 5 minutes, maybe 10. And he wouldn't give me that time. So I didn't publicize his book.
Right. I mean, if you're helping kind of in a way free promotion, right?
Yeah.
You're not asking for anything but like to come talk on the show. You think most people, and usually I'm sure most people are more than happy to sit down and discuss stuff
Even
for a while.
even famous people,
Mhm.
who really are in the field and really, they'll and it's usually hard to get them off the phone. But it's been it's I think I've only had two people where I said, not doing it, not doing it. There's something about not wanting to talk to me ahead of time that says they're not going to talk very well. I mean, Mark had somebody a while back who he had read the book of the person. And when he tried to talk to the person about the book, they suddenly forgot what they wrote. And he was flabbergasted. And, I could hear his jaw drop. And it was like, I'm sitting there listening, saying, oh, I wonder how he's going to deal with this one. He did fine. But it's sort of like, and apparently he had even spoken with that person prior to the show and they had a wonderful conversation and he got her on the air and she suddenly didn't want to say anything. She couldn't even remember a past life experience she had written about in the book.
Wow.
So that
That
does
makes you
happen.
wonder,
Well, yeah, I mean, I did suggest after the fact that maybe a ghostwriter had written the book, but we with as many shows as we've done, you're going to have unusual experiences, and we've had them. But that's it's sort of like people who own boats. You never hear about it was a beautiful day and everything went well and it was, happy, happy, happy. You hear, well, the rudder broke and the bilges filled, or you hear about disasters. But Mark and we can talk disasters real good.
Yeah. I mean, we can definitely share some of our own, maybe not with interviewees, but some of our experiences. We were on a TV channel. I almost said it. I almost said I would have had to edit it out because I don't remember if I signed an NDA or stuff. But we went and told our story, and it was a pretty big story for our group. 5 or 6 of us, at least actual group members, about five, and then we had a couple tag-alongs experience this event, which was really fascinating. We're in the middle of Kiowa Bennett, which at the time completely barren. Like you could see for miles, you could see the airport way off in the distance, and it's flat, just prairie land. And this whole time we could hear this like ghost truck coming up the hill, right? And then you wouldn't see it. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Because it sounds so close, but it was never there. And then all of a sudden it was like right in front of us. And it was one of those big, like long bed, um, like tow trucks.
Yeah.
And all the lights were off on the outside. But the cab lights were like as bright as I could remember, but there's no one driving. And it was just idling in front of us for I don't know how long. It felt like an eternity.
Yeah.
And we're all watching it. And then all of a sudden it just like slowly goes away. And I remember Nick, who we were up there actually investigating a location where his step-uncle was murdered. It was an unsolved murder at the time. And he just looks at me and he's like, that didn't seem fucking real. And I was like, no, it didn't. Because we were all just like, you want to record it. And luckily my uncle had the forethought to like pull up the camera at least. But the whole time I just remember we're like, what's going to happen? We don't know. But we had that retold twice. And the bad one was on TV. So people have seen it because of that, where they cut out all the other interviewees they had from our group and just left me and my brother
Oh, wow.
and made it seem like we had no idea what we were doing and made it seem like this ghost truck had killed another person up there. And I was like, where did you get that information? Luckily, we were able to tell our story through an author we met. Her name is Erica Gammon. And I always recommend that. I'm like, if you've seen that, please go read that because she didn't change anything. It's in her book. Just go read that. It's much more better. So I've definitely had bad experiences, but I'm sure you've made some lifelong friends doing this too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I met Mark.
Mm.
When I met him, we were both on a different station. And, I chatted with him from time to time. And then I left because they weren't able to facilitate what we needed for the show. And, uh, and then shortly thereafter, Mark called and said that he had left. And I thought, oh, goody, I'll grab him. And then he called and told me that he had another gig with somebody else. And I thought, well, that's good. I'm glad he's happy. And then he left that one. And I can't remember if it was two or three others, but I got very frustrated finally. And when he called me, it was either the next time or the time after. I can't remember which, but, I said, just come over to Nightlight. I'll give you a show. You don't have to do anything other than the show. And I get veto, because I really, don't want something that's not appropriate on Nightlight.
Mhm.
And we've had a lovely time ever since then. And he's brought amazing people onto the show. And yes, we've had some very unusual experiences. but it's podcasting. What do you expect?
Right. I mean, when there's like different dynamics involved, you never know how it's gonna go.
We did. Who was it? And he'll know, and I can't remember. It was an author who had talked about a spirit dog, and I can't remember the name of it, but we had such problems with that interview. It was, oh darn, it was Philip Graham, something Graham, Graham Phillips,
Okay.
and and the dog's name or whatever it was name brought weird stuff into the family and stuff like that. And ever since that interview, for a week or two, everything went wrong. I mean, I would schedule for 2 hours, it would play for 12 minutes. Um, we would miss connections with people. Things would, go strange. And it was, I think, a mongoose, or looked like a mongoose. And it was just so weird that I said to him, I don't believe in this, but it seems like that's what's happening. We're
Right.
we're cursed. And it went away after a while, but it was very unusual.
That's funny. Sam can attest to this. I think this started, we were deep diving a movie review about aliens. I was like, what were we talking about? And we haven't had any issues with Skype. Knock on, hold on.
Knock on
Okay.
wood.
Yeah, so everything was fine up until that interview, and then all of a sudden, it stopped twice, and we're like, "Oh, that's weird." And then it did the next day, and then it was just like fine again, and we're like, "What is going on?" Like, because Skype doesn't have like a backlog, like a limit. It just has 30 days you have to pull it, but we could not figure out what was going on.
Well, when you're working with a lot of stuff, there
Mhm.
is energy involved. I guess the energy could interfere. I don't know for sure. It's a good explanation. We have had the energy of the person who was on the show affect the show. We had somebody on as a host. They were invited to have a show on Nightlight, and for the month that they did shows, we lost subscribers
Hmm.
like crazy. And this host eventually pushed my buttons to the point he attacked one of his guests verbally,
Really?
and it was awful. And I talked to him about it, and he said, "It's my show. I'll do what I want." And I said, "You certainly will. Take it somewhere else." And I removed all of his shows, so he's not on the. And as soon as I removed all of his shows, and there have been 6, 8, a lot of them, we immediately got all the subscribers back.
That's crazy. I mean, that's people can sense out like people's energies or mindsets,
Oh yeah,
people can pretend any way they want, and this is something we've talked about when we've watched documentaries where they try to put on a face, but deep down you can sense what their real like actual motive is behind it.
oh yeah. But this was, I never experienced anything like that before. And then at one time, because I was moving, I said to Mark, let's take a month off. And he was worried that um, people would forget about us. And we did take the month off. We got more subscribers that month than we did in the previous 2 or 3 months. I said to him, look, we don't do a show and we get more subscribers. We should take time off, more.
Right.
We haven't done that again, but it was so amazing that they just kept on cranking.
Right. That's something we've been experiencing lately is where we're just getting like subscribers even on days we're not posting. And it's just like, whoa, where are these people like coming from? Like it's great.
Well, you have archives, right?
Hmm.
So that's where, and I keep saying to Mark, our archives are doing very well. I mean, we have a couple of shows that have archived 7, 8,000 times, which for us is big. And some of them, I don't understand why they archived. I mean, they were a nice show, but whew, I have no idea why. None.
Right. We have videos like that. Like you work really hard, at least. So we have different types of videos. Either we have ones that we make and try to make more documentary style. We have vlogs, we have interviews, and sometimes we work super, super hard on these documentary ones. And they look as nice as we can make them with the limits, money, financial, all that. And they get like no views. And then we get like a silly little vlog that we did, and it's just like thousands of views. And I'm like, can you guys please go watch the other one too?
Well, I've told Mark, my liking a show a lot and being really excited about it is the kiss of death. It's almost like that was the best show I've ever done, and I'm so excited about it. And 12 people watched it. I mean, we get more archives than that, but it's kind of like, what am I missing? When I am so excited about something, and the interview is good, and the person is great,
Hmm.
and then it doesn't archive as well as some of the stupid stuff.
Right. Yeah. We've had some, because we do a lot of shorts too, which really help us keep up like the algorithm, but not have to put as much work into one video so that we can put more work into a bigger one. And sometimes it's the silliest little skits we'll do, and people just like watch it and subscribe, like third or fourth most highest subscribed videos. I'm just like, what are we missing? Like, is it this easy to do silly things?
Well, it could be you had such a good time doing it that shows, and
Mhm.
that attracts people. I mean, I think some of the shows that I thought were spectacular were, for me, insightful with wisdom shared and stuff like that. And it may not be to everybody's taste. And that could be, but and the cool thing is it's fun. We do what we enjoy doing, and
Mhm.
we share it. And name of the show is Nightlight because basically we're creating a light in the darkness of ignorance of the times. It's meant to be enlightening. So in a way, the show is meant to be a teaching tool, but it's also meant to be fun. Lord knows Mark has fun for sure.
Mhm.
He definitely does. We've had him help co-host on one show, and it was so much fun. It was great too because now our viewers can see him instead of just us mentioning him. They can actually see who he is. We'll have to at some point get both of you together and do a show,
Or a bracket.
a bracket.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing like March Madness style brackets.
Uh-huh.
We did one with Billy the Kid movies, and we had an author, John LeMay, who's done some Billy the Kid, but also done a bunch of UFOs because he lives in Roswell.
Mhm.
And then we had Michael Anthony Judah Sissy, who does purely Billy the Kid, and we just like try to rank and see which ones we would vote on. So yeah,
But not an end as we all expected, though. That's for
no,
sure.
Well, if you're going to get Mark on, make sure he brings Francis with him.
Francis.
Francis. He has a parakeet, Francis.
Oh, okay. I will. I'll make sure because I think he's gonna come on another one. We're doing
Because Francis talks, not real
Oh
talk. It,
really?
it tweets, but
Uh
he's very, very verbal.
no, I'll have to have him bring him on. So I
Yeah,
mean
pretty
we've
fun.
talked about your show. Like how did you come into this like field? Because like, your late husband was like also in the religious field too. Like how did you guys like gradually come into this? Like was it slow or did something spark it really quick or
I saw a UFO when I was in college,
okay.
and it landed on my campus. And from then on, I talked about it, but nobody believed me and wanted to know how much beer it had to drink. And so I did. I started doing Nightlight in 2009, and I had a guest on that had written a book called In Focus about authenticated UFO sightings, and my college sighting was one of them. So I
Mm.
was I was talking to this author, and in the chat room was this guy kept saying, I'm an expert in the field and I'm a big deal and yada, yada, yada. And I thought, good for you, buddy. I got an author, and the author had to leave. And so I pulled this guy on and it was Patrick. And we started talking. And after the show, he wrote me and we started to talk back and forth. And then I became a co-host on his radio show, which was Matrix Radio. And I mean, he had the Bible UFO Connection was one of the biggest websites out there for the longest time about UFOs. And at one point, we decided that it would be fun to get together because he was in San Francisco and I was in Connecticut. So I flew I flew out to San Francisco, and he picked me up at the airport with his 3 cats and everything he owned in the car. And our very first date was driving across country for 6 days.
Oh wow.
And trust me, if you can't get along in a car for 6 days, don't even try to go further with that. So, so then um, we started working on Secrets of the Stones, and we got married. And a year and a half later, he passed away. So that's how that all happened. And then, of course, I've been in the metaphysical field for over 50 years now, and he didn't believe in any of it. So it was quite a combination.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna talk a little bit about being an empath and like readings and stuff like that, because I think right now we're at a time much like World War I and stuff. A lot of people have lost a lot of loved ones,
Yes.
and they're trying to go get readings. And I think it would be important for viewers to know if they how to tell they're going to someone legitimate or not.
That's a really, really good question. First of all, if you've lost someone that's close to you, you most probably are getting messages and you just don't trust them. You're probably experiencing them in the dream state or finding things moved around or all sorts of things. And you just don't trust yourself to go to somebody who can tap into that energy. It's hard because there are people that charge a lot of money, but that doesn't make them that good. It just means they're charging what the traffic will bear. It's really hard to, I would say, get references, ask to speak with people that have had the experience with them. And most people who do this will give those references. And if they don't because they say it's private and I can't, don't go to them. You're opening yourself up in a very, very painful area, and you just don't want to get a message that somebody's ego says they should say to you. It's not okay, you should have done this, or what. A spirit would never say that. Spirit, once you leave body, you leave behind your stupidities, your arrogances, your judgmentalship. You're pure spirit. And if you're pure spirit, you're just light. And all you're going to want to do is basically say, I miss you and I love you and I'm going to be around. I would not recommend people look to people. I would recommend that they start meditating. And in meditating, they will get messages from their loved ones. Um, and pay attention to what's happening around you. I know when Patrick died, um, one of the first things I did was, strip the bed and wash everything and, get it all clean and whatever. And when I went to put everything back onto the bed, there were pennies on the mattress.
Hmm.
Now, I don't sleep with money. And if I did, it wouldn't be pennies. So it was like, okay, I got you. You're around. Sometimes birds or flowers, you'll see things that will remind you of that person, that will be that person checking in. To try to connect to a spirit that's just crossed over isn't a kindness to them. It's your ego talking. And if you take the time to learn how to meditate, to learn what some of the symbols are that you can get, those are of greater authenticity than someone sitting there with their eyes closed saying, I think I've got him. He had blonde hair. No, maybe it's brown. I mean, I don't want to call them frauds, but psychics, intuits, and whatever, when they say they're reading you in your energy field. They're picking up stuff from your energy field, and every now and then they can pick up some very valid information that you need to hear. But when it comes to one passing over, don't do that. That's I mean, my goodness, Houdini and his wife had a code word that he would send through, and she went to psychics all over the place. Never got the code word. Patrick and I never agreed on the element of reincarnation. I totally believe in it. He did not. And so at one point, before he got sick, I said, okay, look, whoever goes first comes back and tells the other person who was right. So Patrick's been gone over 10 years. Haven't heard a word from him. I know I was right.
Yeah, you speak of Houdini. I actually have Houdini's pamphlet that where he debunks Marjorie in it. I'd go get it, but it's in the other room, and I'm afraid I don't want to like knock something and make it fall down. But yeah, Houdini's. I grew up a huge Houdini fan, so that always kind of helped me not fall for it because I've experienced a lot of death. But like you said, I've had a lot of experiences in dreams that just feel a little too real, right? I
Yeah.
had one recently, and it'd been almost 2 years since my late papu passed. And it was just the weirdest dream. We walked in, and because he worked at a liquor store, they go to different, places, Kentucky bourbon, stuff like that, and pick different barrels for their stores and stuff. And so I walked in. He's working. The whole store was just like bright white, and he was just making some drinks. And he's like, "Oh, I've missed you. It's been a while." And I was just like, "Huh," because I've had some weird ones. Like, I mean, I can tell you some ghost stories with that we've had, but yeah, I just think it's important for people to, when they're in such a vulnerable state, to not
Right.
get
But
taken advantage of.
I would suggest you journal down every one of those instances, because what that does is it creates a link with this side and the other side.
Mm.
So it makes it easier. But I will promise you, you're never going to get direction. You're never going to have them tell you what to do with your life. Um, they're basically a loving energy that is available to you if you need it. But I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I've tried a couple times, and it's always a very simple question I've asked the psychics is because when my great grandma passed away in 2009, she wrote me a little note. So I know what she said and everything. I have it still, it's written down. But I always ask them, I'm like, what did she say? Because they were like, oh yeah, she's here, and not one person's gotten it right. I'm like, well, if she said it, she should be able to remember what she said.
Yeah, and it just it's heartbreaking
Mm,
when you get it wrong. And there are people that can get it right. The Long Island psychic, she's really good. She can really get stuff. But I don't know, who I would recommend anybody else to. I just it's be your own psychic. You have the capability, you have the ability, and trust yourself. You're going to get signs. Write them down.
yeah, and they could be just very simple things. You think of a memory out of the blue. Write it down.
Mhm.
You know, you
Or,
know.
or music on the radio, or any number
Mm,
of things. It's them contacting you. I would say that is more authentic than somebody who you're paying for to give you information. And I'm not saying that all psychics are cheats, because they're not. And for years I worked as a psychic, and I met a lot of people that were incredibly genuine,
mhm.
but you can't guarantee that. And it makes more sense to develop your own ability to touch in and tap in. I know if I want to get I know a lot of time, if I'm doing an interview or something and they ask me a question dealing with biblical stuff that I don't happen to know, I suddenly have the answer. And I know it came from Patrick because I did not know the answer. So he was there.
Yeah.
But, that was nice and thank you. But,
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, we definitely do a lot of ghost investigations and stuff like that. So we definitely believe they're out there, and
oh, yeah.
we we believe that we can tap into that world. I think people see TV shows and they're like expecting that level, and I'm like, most of the time those TV shows are there for like 8+ days, like, and it's combined to like 40 minutes. So of course they're gonna have more than just like a little bitty EVP like we get, but
Well, remember Taps? I don't know
mhm.
if they're still on the air.
Yeah,
they
they
did
came back on.
they did a show at that hotel where that show happened, the big one, um, the Labyrinth one, the Red Room one. The I can't remember the name of the show. The Overlook. It was the Overlook,
Mm,
and they were in the basement of the Overlook, and Yes, always at night, of course. And you saw them both freeze and say, "Did you hear that?" And, of course, I leaned in and it was like, "Hear what?" And you heard something that sounded like hello. Um, and I sat back and I said, "Have you never heard a cat in distress?"
Right.
That's what they sound like. They sound like they're saying hello. And all I could think of is there's a cat trap down there and they're going off on a spirit, whatever. And it was mind boggling.
Yeah. No, there was a show, and this was pre-Taps, and I think it was Most Haunted, but they were at the Queen Mary. And
Oh, yeah.
me and my brother always bring this up because they're walking around and they're like, of course it's an old ship, it's gonna creak
Yeah.
and stuff. But they're walking, you hear, "Ooh, ooh," and they're like, "Did you hear that?"
It's a
And
bird.
we're like, "What?" And you hear it again. It's like, "Ooh," and we're like, "Oh, it's a pigeon." They're like, "It's a demon." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Clearly, it's a pigeon."
Yes. No, I just I went on I have a friend who's a surrogate daughter, and for her 40th birthday, she wanted to go on a ghost hunt.
Okay.
And she's, and so she found a place where you could go through a ghost hunt. They take you through. And I said, "That's not authentic." And she said, "Well, nobody authentic will take me anywhere." And I said, "Well, find some ghost hunters who have a legitimate business and give me their name." And she did. And I called them and I said, "I want to do a radio show on what you do, but I want to go on a ghost hunt and I have to bring my assistant with me." And they said, "Well, that certainly, but we don't have anybody on the books at the moment." And I said, "I happen to know of a haunted house." And I did because I had been working there and I knew the whole story. I knew the whole story. And so they came and they set up all their equipment and oh my God. I mean, it was hours and hours and hours. And all I could think of was, I hope she's having a good time because this is really not my idea of fun. And we did get some EVPs. We did get some stuff. And there were things in the house went back to the 1600s. And so it had energy in it for sure. And I mean, those people went back to that house about 10 times, for groups of people and everything. But she got her ghost hunt in and it was authentic and it was delightful. I don't need to do it again.
Yeah, it's definitely not like the TV show. Like I said, most of the time it's condensed,
Oh yeah.
multiple nights. But we've had people join our group and then they're just like they leave because they're like, A, it's too much work because there's a lot of research and work you got to put into it.
Oh yeah.
But then, they go there and they're like, "Well, when's this gonna happen?" I'm like, I mean, maybe never. like, like if, um, we've been working with that college in Alamosa, and it's so much fun to help them build their group up. And I think they have a really dedicated group, so I think they'll do good. But it took a while this last time for anything to happen. Like it was kind of slow. Like everyone was mentioning this. They're like, "Man, it's really slow compared to last time." But no one like lost faith. And then there was a storage closet on the auditorium stage that was motion sensor, and it turned on. And the auditorium was closed, so you could get onto the balconies, but you couldn't get down below. We eventually got down below. We had to get kind of creative to get down there and get the PD to let us in and stuff like that. But once that happened, it picked up a little bit, and then it was gone. So it's not guaranteed.
No, and it's never what you expect. I mean, the house that we were in, there had been a murder in, and not only had there been a murder in it, but the people who owned it, um, when they found out where the body was buried, it was in a stone wall on the property. They literally went and found the bones.
Oh wow.
So it validated the whole story. I mean, it was authentic, but it was just it was a very cool experience, and I'm very glad I had it. I don't need to go back.
Yeah. Kind of going off like the spiritual thing, though, you had a pretty interesting way of finding a house with a cemetery.
Ah, well, um, when I told my son I was going to move to Nashville, um, he was surprised, but supportive. So I put my house in Connecticut up for sale, and it was up for sale for a year and a half. And during that year and a half, my best friend and I every day were on the computer for probably 2 hours looking at all of the places that were available within a certain distance from where my son lives. And the day I got an offer on the house, the unit I'm in now, when they dropped their price. So I called my son and I said, please go look and see if it's as nice as I think it is. And he did. And he said, you want to come look? You want to fly out and look? I said, no, buy it. Because my house in Connecticut was in my trust. So, and he's the trustee. So I said, just buy it. And this is what I want you to tell them I'll give them. And he said, no, you're supposed to bargain, Mom. I said, nope, tell them what I want. What I'll pay, and tell them it's all cash. And the things there were absolutes. I wanted a fireplace. I wanted to be by water, and Tennessee is not on the shoreline. So, water was something I was going to have to say, okay, maybe not. And the first time I actually saw it, I was when I moved in, and I loved it. It's perfect. It was meant to be, and I felt that. But there was a little bit of I doubt it in the back of my mind too. And each of the units has, and the other part was it's bigger than the house that I had in Connecticut. My son said every time you move, you get bigger, you don't get smaller. You're supposed to be downsizing. And I said, what can I say? So I did after I got settled, I went out and walked around there are only 14 units. So I walked around and checked everything out. And I noticed at one point that behind my house there was a stream. My son calls it a drainage ditch. It's a stream, a little stream, but it's a stream. And right behind my house there were privet bushes, and there's a cemetery there. And the cool thing about it is it's a very old cemetery, and it's on the cemetery registry and everything. Everybody there died in the 1800s or late 1700s. So it's an old cemetery. And somebody said, does that freak you out? And I said, no, I think that's fabulous. And I love it. It's a very small one. And there's only one tombstone there that I could read the name of. And I got the name and the birth date and death date, and I shared it with my friend who does genealogy. And after a little researching, she said, you're not going to believe this. And the guy buried there is Thomas Smiley. And turns out Thomas had a sister named Hattie. And Hattie was married to a man called Aaron DeLong, who is an ancestor of mine.
Isn't that crazy?
And I
I
think
heard you talking about that. I was like, oh man, I gotta ever tell that on the show.
I told my son, I'm more Southern than you are. I have kin buried in the backyard. He
Yeah.
did not think that was funny, but but I it's kind of like, okay, a DeLong belongs here. And
Mhm.
if I needed validation, I got it. So it was, very exciting to me.
Yeah,
And
we were just talking about listening to signs, and that feels like one of the biggest signs I think you could get.
well, and the neat thing is the Smiley family settled the area that I'm in now. So um it was really just one of it's one of the coolest things that's happened to me in a long time.
No, that's great. I love hearing stuff like that because I'm a huge fan of family history and just research. And man, I wish something like that would happen to me. Like that'd be so cool,
Be careful what you wish for.
right?
Um, I know that Mark helps a lot of people, and there have been times in the past where I've thought, well, I'm a good interview. Why isn't anybody interviewing me? It's just, I do the interviews. And so when the book came out, I figured Ken will do the interviews. Mark set up, I think, 18 interviews for me. And again, be careful what you wish for. Yeah, and I'm working on another project with Ken, and it's, when am I going to have time to do this writing that I want to do and read a 500-page book every week and do the interviews? This
Mhm.
is crazy. It's fun, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about the book, but and my other stuff. But it's overwhelming after a while.
Right. I can totally relate, especially with this the classes being added on and being a single dad. I'm like, uh um but we've tried to listen to some other interviews, and I even saw you giving a presentation.
Oh,
Um
geez.
uh, I don't know, I don't think that one was on your YouTube, but someone uploaded it. It was about your documentary, but one of your interviews, we were talking about giants, which I thought was an interesting topic. There was a TV show not too long ago, probably like 6, 7 years ago. I think
Jim
on
with Jim Vieira, I think.
something. Yeah, they were like going out trying to find all these fossils, and they found like a tooth or something in a cave or something. But I
Oh,
wanted to.
that's the Denisovan, Denisovan.
No, no, it was in America. They were looking for giants. It was on Travel Channel. Only ran for a season, and they were like trying to dig in this like chamber or something, but they
That was Jim Vieira, I think.
was it?
He's actually a stonemason, and
Okay.
I think he worked with a couple of other people too. But yeah, giants are fabulous. I mean, of course, the Smithsonian is destroyed as much as they can, but they still exist.
I know the Smithsonian just stole our Triceratops from our museum up in Boulder. I was very sad about it.
Wow. Hopefully they have better administrators than they did in the 1800s when they really took off on them.
Mm. Yeah, some of the old stuff, but yeah, the giants are interesting. You see a lot of talk about them in different cultures and native cultures here, and even perhaps some depictions in wall art and stuff like that. Like, what are your thoughts more on giants?
Oh, I believe they existed. Um, Patrick had a lot of material on them on his website, and that is on my website now. Um, as far as the Bible goes, they absolutely existed. I have, I had at one time, what point in time, probably about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I had a co host who she had been born with double rows of teeth, extra digits on her hands and feet, and had red hair. And it was something that ran true in her family. And those are the designators that people have said, giants had. The cave in Nevada, where the whole group of giants, red-haired giants, were killed, and then when they discovered them, not I think in the 1900s, it wasn't in the 1800s, but they found the bones and the skulls with the double rows of teeth. Um, it's they're out there. They did exist. There's no question about it. And genetically, we've wiped most of them out. So of course, they aren't having children, and there aren't baby giants around. And but there are people with giantism, which
Mhm.
is now they say it's a medical whatever. I think it's in the DNA and it suddenly comes out. I think that it's still there. It's in our DNA. I think we probably all have some, but I do believe they existed. And for some reason, the powers that be don't want to acknowledge it. But it's the same thing with the little people. They kind of ignore those too. But there were great fields of where there were battles that everybody there was a giant that died. I mean, you just they again, another case of it's part of history, that is being ignored that would make history so much more interesting when taught in school.
Yeah, and you kind of
True.
go into a different type of hominid. There's like stories during the Korean or Vietnam War where soldiers are fighting, like, I think not, maybe they were orang pendek, um, but like, a type of like, not Bigfoot because they're smaller. But yeah, there's like these whole stories where like, there's firefights with some unknown ape in the forest, and you wonder. I mean, you don't think all of them could be fibbing about
Well,
that.
look at Bigfoot. Look at the Yeti. I think they do exist. But frankly, if I were one of them, I wouldn't have anything to do with humanity. So, it's not a matter of um, they aren't developed. I mean, with Bigfoot especially, when they quote attack, they throw rocks. I mean, they don't do anything that is terribly destructive. They want to chase you off. Mary Joyce of Skyships Over Cashiers has a wonderful book that she's written that I think it's Beyond the Footsteps of Bigfoot. It's a charming book. It talks about all sorts of Bigfoot experiences that are all just so sweet and loving. It's amazing. And, people are out to shoot them and to get the body to discover, where they come from and everything. There was, according to Mary Joyce, and are you familiar with her?
I know her a little bit. Yeah, I've researched a little bit of her stuff.
She is an amazing reporter. She would never report anything that she didn't have the information for. And they found a sample of hair and blood from a Bigfoot, and it was analyzed. And it turns out that the mother was human, but the father was of a species undetermined. So, I don't know where they came from.
Right. Yeah, no, Bigfoots are really interesting. We have a little museum about 45 minutes from us called the Sasquatch Outpost, and they have a bunch of different footprints and hair samples, and they even took some, they cut off like the hair from their horses because the Bigfoots would come and braid the horses' manes and stuff,
Oh, how cool.
right? They did have one where they have like, it looks like the Bigfoot's chasing an elk. And it's weird because the elk's running. You can see it's like running full speed, and you see the Bigfoot tracks. And then all of a sudden, the elk's just like fell over. But then
Wow.
it had to get picked straight up. So, I mean, elks are massive, but yeah, Bigfoots have always been interesting. I've flip flopped on back and forth a few times on my thinking of if they're real or not. I definitely, at this point, I'm like, I feel like they could definitely be out there.
I think they're interdimensional. I think the reason that we've not ever found a body is because they don't live in this dimension. That in the areas that they're in, there are some sort of either portals or stargates or whatever you want to call them. But I don't think they're indigenous. I think that they come and go at will.
Yeah, see, interdimensional Bigfoot is a topic we've talked about a little bit. I read a book, I think it's Sasquatch Exploring the Myth and Discovering the Truth by Tom Burnett and Rob Riggs.
Hmm.
And it starts off pretty much like, I guess, any other Bigfoot book. But then at the end, because I think they both live in Texas, or at least one lives in like Texas. So they have all these encounters. But then he gets to that part where he's talking about them maybe being interdimensional. Well, he says they are in his book. So that was like my first experience, and it's something we've talked about a little bit. And there's definitely different cryptids that seem like they're perhaps interdimensional, or aliens maybe are interdimensional.
Well, you want to call it slippage or folding time or any number of things, but I believe they do exist, but I don't think they mean us any harm, and I think we should just leave them alone. I mean, they're not coming down and wanting to run for Congress. I mean, of course they might get elected. I mean, but it just
They might do better than some of them.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was I was just thinking that might not be a bad idea, but but No, they stay to themselves. I think we should leave them alone. When we discover in South America and in Africa tribes that have never had contact with the outside world, we're very careful about leaving them alone to their culture and not intervening and using the Star Trek non-intervention. And I don't see why we don't do that with Bigfoots. They're not going to breed and overrun us, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, because
So
they clearly would have done that. I mean, they're
sure.
massive. Like, it's not like they couldn't physically overpower people if they wanted. It seems like I've read a lot of stories too, though, where it seems like they're very aware of people with guns and they know what that is and they get very scared.
Oh
Like
yeah.
their attitude completely changes.
You should check out Mary Joyce's book on Bigfoot. You read it in an afternoon,
Okay.
but it is just the sweetest thing. I cry. I cried when I read it. It was so sweet. So that takes a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'll definitely add it to the list and because it's probably on Amazon, right? I can just pick it
Yeah.
up off Amazon. Okay. Yeah,
I
that's
definitely want
the
to check it out as well.
yeah, I'll send you the link once I find it, Sam.
Like,
I've read a couple Bigfoot. That one I was oh no, it's called Bigfoot, not Sasquatch. That's a different one. I'm trying to like look because I have like three different bookshelves. So I'm like, which one is it but yeah, you hear a lot of stories, and sometimes this is where I tend to question people because we've talked a lot about Skinwalker Ranch, and their like first motive is just shoot it. Like
Yeah.
everything that happens, they're just running around shooting at it. If it's a wolf, they've shot it. If it's the thing flying around the trees, they shoot it. If it's the aliens, they're shooting. Like if they can fly here from another planet or another dimension, I don't think our bullets are gonna like do much to them.
Well, I think Skinwalker Ranch. Now I have to admit, I'm addicted to it like I am Oak Island. I have been watching Oak Island for 10 years, and I know if I stop watching it, they'll find something. It'll be the year I don't watch. But
Right.
but Skinwalker Ranch, there has to be something under that mesa, and whether it's an alien, whatever. And one would think it had to be because the government did at one point try to discover what it was. But they're talking frequencies, they're talking possibly cloaking materials, they're talking UFOs, and they brought in, which I didn't agree with, the animal mutilation. They brought in Linda Moulton Howe for that. I'm not in favor of that. It feels like they're beginning to invent stuff as opposed to really work with what's there.
Hmm.
And although I can't debate the physicality of the difficulties that some people get and feel, that's very real. But I think it has to do with wavelength and frequency. It's sort of like they're incorporating some of the Havana stuff, using sounds to make people uncomfortable and things like that. They're blowing it out of proportion, I think. And I don't think you're ever going to see the mountain open up and a flying saucer come out.
they're trying to
Right.
make it see at that point so that
Right.
people
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, no, with Skinwalker Ranch, I think Sam knows my feelings on it. I'm not opposed to paranormal things happening there. And much like you see in Corona, where the saucer crash for Roswell, or even here in Hooper, Colorado, where the UFO watchtower is, I do think paranormal stuff, UFOs and stuff like that's happening
Yeah.
because, and especially out in the middle of nowhere where you're more open to it because you're not distracted by so much. I just question the story of the Gormans because sometimes I'm just like, they're just running around shooting at nothing, and the
Yeah.
research team isn't even seeing anything.
Well, they got the radiation detectors. I can't explain that
Mhm.
unless there is something going on beneath them. But the new place to watch and watch for is Alaska and their mountain ranges there. There is supposedly in one of the mountains there's supposedly a black pyramid and an alien base.
And isn't there like a landing strip or something up in one
No,
of them? No, not that one. It's a different one I'm thinking of.
no, I didn't see anything about that. But they are talking about the fact that there is a black pyramid inside one of the mountains and an alien base there, and it's in such a an out of the way place that nobody goes, which would be a great place to have an alien outpost.
Yeah,
So
similar to like I don't know if you ever watched the show Project Blue Book,
sure.
where they've talked about some of the, or I recreated some of the events and dramatized some of the events, but how perhaps they're under the ocean too.
Oh, probably. I mean, when you well
Rock.
look at Admiral Berg and Inner Earth. I mean, they prevented him from sharing his diary, yet they sent him with Operation High Jump to go check it out. And then they got attacked by flying saucers and came home.
Right? It's kind of like Battle LA, where you think if it's like all these weather balloons, why didn't they hit any of them? You think we've learned recently that they can hit balloons in the air. So you think they could have hit some balloons back in the day too,
You would think.
especially since that's what their like go-to cover up. We actually started making like a running gag on our channel where we'd be like, there was a Bigfoot sighting. We'd be like, it's probably a weather balloon. I
Yeah.
mean, near surface weather balloon.
Well, what fascinated
Rock.
me with what happened here, they weren't talking about balloons for the secondary sightings, and there was
Mhm.
an octagon shaped. They called it an object. They didn't call it a balloon. Nothing about it, though. Nothing beyond it. It's kind of like the news went beyond it and that was it, and nobody cares.
Right? Yeah, that was what got me too, because they're talking the Canadian and the U.S. military are working together. There's some
Mhm.
objects they're shooting down,
Yeah.
at least a couple of them. And then it was just like, all right, what's the next piece of news? And I'm like, wait, let's talk more about that. What did they shoot down? Is that some more? I mean, even if it's more spy balloons, just say that. But if
Yeah.
it's not, then what are they? You know?
I don't know. We've got a space patrol,
Hmm.
and on top of that, there is the space fleet that's out there that nobody's talking about. So I think at some point in time, what we're being sold and what is reality is going to have to meet someplace. And I do believe there is a space fleet out there. It's. I think that we are. There's almost two levels of awareness, two levels of government, and we're in the dumb side. So it's a matter of you can what you feel, what you believe in. You can't prove, and they just sit back and watch you squirm.
Right? It reminds me of a quote from the documentary as well as a movie JFK, right? A mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma.
Yes, exactly what it is. And even though that's what it is, you can't prove it.
Hmm.
So you have to find something else you can prove. Otherwise, you just waste your life.
Right? Yeah. No, we've gone through a lot of their disclosed UFO documents, or we've started to. And it's interesting, but a lot of times there's whole pages that are just blocked out. And at
Mhm.
that point, when there's thousands of docs, like clearly there's not gonna be just like the JFK stuff. It comes out and you're like, well, redacted, redacted, redacted. Okay, I didn't learn anything from that one.
Well, it's now common knowledge, supposedly, that the CIA helped to orchestrate the assassination of Kennedy. What happened? Who did it? Why? Nothing. They just acknowledge the fact that the CIA did it. It leaves you sitting back saying, what else have they done? And I've stopped watching the news because you can't believe anything anymore. Even where you thought you were getting real news, you're not. So surviving is probably, I said to Patrick once, well, where do you go to find out what the truth is? He said, you don't go to the newscasters for sure. You don't go to the newspapers for sure. He said, you have to go behind the scenes and glean pieces all over the place. And I don't know that he would have done that even at this point in time. It's so crazy that you kind of, let's pick a topic we can actually research and go into that.
Mm.
And maybe somebody else will fill in the blanks later.
Right. Yeah. No, JFK along with Roswell, because anymore it seems like there's conspiracies about everything. But back in the day when we were growing up, there was just like super crazy ones that were kind of fun to read because they were so bonkers. Like clearly they weren't true. Then there was like the accepted ones that were like, yeah, they were conspiracies, but they happened. Then there's the ones that are like, probably happened because of Arkham's razor, right? And JFK and Roswell have always been those for me, where just like the story changes so much officially. It's like, well, if
Yeah.
it's the official story, why does it keep changing?
Well, and what gets you is sometimes they will say, yeah, it happened. And yet, and there's proof, but nothing is done. Nobody's put on trial. Nobody's put in jail. It's the, yeah, it happened.
Hmm.
And I sit back and say, well, so why even obey the law? Because clearly the law has been broken and nothing is done. Is it your station in life that says, okay, you can break the law and we won't do anything? I don't understand. So that's why I'm into the spiritual and the paranormal. That's easier to understand.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting, you know. It was just a weather balloon. No, it was just a super secret weather balloon, or it comes out with the police motorcade where the radio was on and you hear multiple gunshots above the three, and they're like, oh, it was another shooting that day. Well,
Yeah.
why didn't you report that before, that there was a second shooting in Dealey Plaza? Sam, since I've kind of hijacked the interview, do you have any questions?
I mean, most of the stuff I was going to be brought up, we already brought up because I was going to mention the interdimensional Bigfoots because I know you and I go back and forth on whether or not we believe in that or not. But kind of back on that topic, I mean, there's many accounts where like people see unidentified flying crafts and then also Bigfoots in the same area or entering crafts and leaving with it. So I definitely am a big believer in potentially that they are definitely not from here.
Well, not only that, but I don't think they mean us any harm either.
True.
I
Like I
mean,
wanted to go squatching one time, but I am very curious to go out there with like out any weaponry and see what like happens and see if we can like I don't know in some way like trade with them with
make
something.
friends. Oh, it's in Mary's book. She talks about one man. I think there was only a lady who lived in a cabin, and it was very. I may not be telling this exactly right, but I am kind of. She lived alone, and she found that they were foraging in her garden, and she got to the point where she would leave a gift for them, and they would take the gift, and then it would be returned a number of days later. And it's very similar to some species. I think it was dolphins or something where they take a gift and they enjoy the gift and then they give it back to the person so they can give it to someone else. I mean, it's that her book is precious. It is my favorite of all that she's written.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have to pick that one up. I think it's ravens too. If you give them a gift, they'll start bringing you more of the similar type of gifts. So if you give them some shiny, they'll bring you shiny objects to show like
Yeah.
how grateful they are.
Yeah, and the great thing with ravens, they have an amazing memory. And Patrick knew somebody that had reported to him that they had a friend, so it's secondhand or so. But the friend had a lot of ravens around his property, and he started shooting them to make them stop coming. And he moved, and where he moved to, suddenly he was swarmed with ravens, getting even. And he moved, I think, 2 or 3 times, different states, different, I mean, just far away from, and ravens always followed him and gave him trouble. So they have a group memory along with an individual memory, which I think is fascinating.
Hmm.
They can travel far distances and communicate to their other friends and
Absolutely.
family, and they're just like, this guy, watch out for him. Like, all right,
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's cool.
no, it's awesome.
His car
Yeah.
didn't think so.
Yeah, and they're much. I mean, I think a lot of times we kind of take for granted where we are and the hubris almost where we top of the mountain. But I know recently they've done some studies, and I don't think it's like fully accepted, but on Sue the Tyrannosaurus Rex's brain case,
Yeah.
and they were studying how intelligent Tyrannosaurus was, and the study said roughly about the same as like chimpanzees or the great apes, which is terrifying, like that big of an predator, but still really fascinating. Like, do they have their own cultures and stuff like that?
Good question. Good
Hmm.
question. Oh, and it's really hard to, if you look at some of the animals, their brains are larger, but they didn't have the same divisions and stuff, so that they were more they were more focused on survival
Hmm.
than they were on intellectually thinking about what's the meaning of life. We have that wonderful
Right.
capacity.
Sometimes it's for the good, sometimes it's not. You sit up at night existentially thinking about things.
Yeah.
So before we end off, because I don't want to get I can sense myself keep trying to talk about Roswell. I'm like, no, we'll talk about
That's
that next
okay.
week. um but yeah, we want to help showcase where they can find your stuff, obviously your website and YouTube and Amazon. So if you want to let the viewers know.
Sure. The website is barbaradelong.com, and it's a big website. It's got lots and lots of stuff on it. And if you're interested in UFOs or giants, there's a real lot of material there, a lot of spiritual stuff. And the YouTube channel is Barbara DeLong as well. So it's real easy to find me. Just Google me. You'll find me all over the place.
Nightlight has been really fascinating for us, watching a bunch of different topics and, like your intro says, from, unicorns to UFOs and everything in between. So
For
I think,
real.
yeah, you've had some great guests on there and some great topics. So I definitely recommend it.
Thank you. It has been an education. It's I have 2 master's degrees in education, but Nightlight Radio is my PhD.
Right.
Yeah,
And I'm
it's
sure you've learned, and
amazing.
yeah, just being able to talk to so many different people, and
Ah, yes,
it's got to be great.
it is. It is so cool. Um, I haven't yet been starstruck, but I have a couple people that will, elicit that for me if I ever break down and actually do a show with them. The world is just available to me through the podcasts. I mean, we're seen all over the world, so it's fun. I had somebody that was a client a long time ago said he was in Sri Lanka, and he was talking to a priest there, and they were talking about meditation and things like that. And he said to the priest, "I know a lady that developed a deck of cards with mandalas on them," and the priest said, "Oh, Barbara DeLong." And I got this email from him. Does the sun ever set on your empire? And apparently not.
No, it's the amazing thing, the connections we can make and just the people we can reach. We look at our statistics on our YouTube channel and just see how far we're getting, and it's amazing. Like India is a big one for us, UK obviously, and
Yeah.
Mexico and Canada and all these different places that we wouldn't be able to normally reach. So that's really fascinating.
And no passport necessary.
Right. Yeah. Which is hard to get anymore.
So I've heard.
You are kind of close to one pretty famous story, the Bell Witch. Have you gone up there or anything like that?
I have not. I know people who, have actually, been to the house and talked to the people in the area. And she was quite a spectacular lady. And I think she was absolutely authentic. So at some point in time, I'm certainly going to check that one out.
Yeah, that one has been one I've wanted to do. I saw an Expedition X episode on it, and I picked up the book and I read that, and I think that'd be fascinating because you can go to their memorial, but then you can go to where they're actually buried, and
Well, and not only that, but she was just such a character.
Mhm.
She was not one of these woo-woo ghosts. She was out there, and I think that it will be, when summer actually hits all the way, I will make the pilgrimage and check it out.
Mhm. You'll have to let us know how it is because I'm
We'll
definitely
certainly do that.
interested. And then one more thing. See, I'm remembering too much now. I was like, now we're gonna end it. I saw you were talking a little bit about the Phoenix Lights and one thing we watched, which is an interesting one for us because our other group member, Alan, lived in Phoenix at the time on the Navajo reservation, and actually we've done videos on it and stuff, but he saw the Phoenix Lights. So I just wanted to see if your take on the Phoenix Lights. And
Well, Lynn Katai is a friend,
oh, really?
and yeah, we had her, excuse me, on Patrick's show, and Patrick had trouble with his eyes, so I read the book and I did the interview. And then after that, I called her and I talked to her and I said, you're dropping a lot of spiritual buzzwords here, and you didn't get into it in the book, but there are too many buzzwords here. So, spill, you know, and so she did. And we started talking about the spiritual aspects of what had gone on. And prior to the actual sighting, that there had been spheres of light that had basically kind of haunted her and her balcony. And of course, then she has the only photographic proof of lost time with the photographs she took. And she did go to the reservation and talk to the people on the reservation there, and found that it was common for them to see lights and ships and things like that. Not the big stuff, but
Mhm.
the activity was certainly there, and she certainly is continuing to go around and be involved in all of this. I know that sighting was seen by as many people as saw the Battle of Los Angeles, and it was a very similar type of thing. The object moved very slowly, and we were able to interview. That was 1947, 42, in there someplace. Um, I'm terrible with dates, but we interviewed a man who had been a boy at the time of the Battle of Los Angeles, and he watched it from his bedroom window. And then we had him on the show as an older adult, and he talked to us about how our armaments never even hit the objects that were there. There had to be a force field of some sort. They were exploded before that, and there was collateral damage, but it was all from our own armaments hitting people on the ground. And the next day, he and his friends all went to the beach and picked up the shrapnel and everything, and the government all gave them money for every piece of shrapnel they could bring back, so that they cleaned it up beautifully. So it was the same type of environment, and same type of, no, you didn't see that, that wasn't actual. And again, like like with me, how much did you have to drink? That couldn't possibly have been a flying saucer. So, and no matter, I mean, even though you have photographic evidence, they deny it to the point where, I mean, you never admit that maybe not, it didn't happen, but you keep quiet after a while because you're sick and tired of being called. How much did you have to drink? That must have been hallucination.
Right. Yeah. No, that one I know for Alan, uh, for it, because he like believes, but he's very skeptical, and that one definitely left a big impression on him because he tells it where his dad was outside and called him and his brother out, and they just watch it kind of like go over because they
Cruise
were
on by. Yeah.
yeah they were on the reservation further out of Phoenix, but
It went very slowly.
mhm.
And when and people were out in the streets, and it was, you can't deny it. And the spotlights were turned on it. They illuminated it. It was an exciting time. And my God, Lynn has dedicated her life to it for I don't know how many years. It wasn't that long ago, but that's all she's done is investigating further and trying to draw more attention to it and say, hey, look, this actually happened. This is not one of ours. This is somebody else's.
I think sometimes with the UFOs, I wonder how much of them are like real UFOs, if that makes sense, and how much of them are like distraction UFOs.
The reason that we wrote the book before Roswell is because after Roswell, then everybody was seeing everything, and you didn't know. But before Roswell, it was basically not such a big deal, and they were reported, but not a whole deal was made of them. So it kind of was after Roswell. At some point, the Battle of Los Angeles, theoretically, one of the saucers actually did crash into the ocean, and the Navy got it, and the Navy was investigating it. The Army was investigating the Roswell stuff. So you never know. Was it ours? Was it, you know, Russia's? Was it China's? Was it, I mean, there have been crashes all over the place, and countries have done the reverse engineering. So you don't know if, who they belong to. They don't have name tags on them. There's no USA or whatever. It's hard to tell. And Hitler also, if it is the truth that, and I believe it is, that the Nazis had a base in Antarctica. Those ships that attacked Project High Jump had swastikas on them. So were they alien? Were they German? Who knows? One could land and you don't know what language they're going to talk when they come out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, the alien species are always interesting to hear. We've delved a bit into it where I mean, obviously I think everyone knows the grays. It's the most common depiction of aliens out there is a gray.
Yeah.
Like if I'm sure people think aliens, it's a gray. But then you got like the insectoids. The reptilians are pretty up there in, as
Yeah.
far as the popular zeitgeist. I know the Nordics. There's like hybrids of different ones. And
Hmm. Got the Plesians, or not the Plesians. Yeah,
Yeah.
Plesians, Rocky.
Well, when primitive man couldn't understand something, he made up stories about it, and he created gods. And I think that in a way, what's happening today, because we don't understand it, imaginations are running wild. I mean, they could easily be humanoid and mixing and mingling with us at will, but because governments want us to be fearful, they have created forms that are fearful. So I'm not really sure that all of these different depictions of aliens are actually valid. Now, a lot of primitive Indians talk about the ant people taking them below the surface of the earth when there was a great flood or a great conflagration. Whole tribes of Indians wouldn't have followed a weird looking ant people unless they were called ant people because they lived underground. And by saying the ant people, suddenly some cartoonist is making up these weird insect looking objects that no self-respecting Indian would have followed. So, I mean, you look at Darren Kuyu, there's 13 stories of underground tunnels that people, up to 5,000 people hid in. They wouldn't have followed a weird alien, but they would have followed a humanoid and that looks like an ant colony. So I don't know. I don't think you're going to see weird shapes. I think you're going to see humanoid shapes if we ever actually see aliens. The Nordics, I definitely, they probably exist. I don't know about the Greys, but quite probably the reptilians and all of the others. I'm going to play I doubt it until I see one.
I've never been too far off of the idea that perhaps they're just people from the future that are coming back, because who knows what's going on. Because if you look at some of the abduction stories and what they're trying to collect and what they're trying to do, it seems more like they're trying to preserve their civilization from, and they're just from the future, like us from the future. And I mean, obviously, if they're reproducing and stuff, they got to be pretty closely genetically to us. Otherwise, they're going to be sterile, much like many hybrids today.
Well, look at Rendlesham Forest. That drone that was at Rendlesham Forest when they did. Are you familiar with Rendlesham Forest? The the binary code that was downloaded to Patterson or Patterson. I had him on the show. You think could remember his last name. But the binary code talked about the human condition and continuing to observe, and the point of origin for the drone was 8100. So it was from the future. So then I thought, isn't that great? We're here in 8100, and then it was like, wait a minute. They said the human condition. They may not be human. That are sending this drone back to check us out, or we could be their ancestors.
Or possibly they're like AI or something like that.
Could be, but I at first was very, isn't this wonderful? We survive, and then it was like they're not saying we survived. They're saying they're checking on our development, and we could be the ant farm that they're watching, which would be disturbing.
Right. Kind of like the movie Prometheus, where they're trying to come back to wipe us all out because they didn't like their creation.
Or wanting to change something so that their future changed.
All very interesting, and I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have.
Absolutely. Anytime
Yeah.
I can talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we'll have to have you. I mean, obviously, we're going to have you back on next week, but we'll have to have you on again after that, perhaps with Mark. Just talk more about the show and how things come together. I think that would be fun.
I think that would be delightful.
So, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll be seeing you in less than a week. Um, but I look forward to it, and I'll make sure I put all your links in the description below because I
Okay.
recommend it. Me and Sam have enjoyed delving into all your different interviews and just learning new topics or getting more information on topics that we already knew a little bit about.
It is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely is.
Thank you, guys. I've had a great time.
Once again, Sam and I want to say a big thank you to Barbara for joining us tonight and giving an exceptionally awesome interview. I know we both enjoyed it and cannot wait to talk to both her and Ken about their new book, Before Roswell. But until then, if you guys want to check out more about Barbara, I'll make sure to put some links in the description below. But both Nightlight as well as her website are both fascinating, and I definitely recommend it. Now, for more Culz interviews, you can click that link to your left. For more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click those links to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, have you listened to Barbara's shows?